So my obeisances to all of you Vaishnavas, all the guests, all the attendees. I'm grateful to have this opportunity, really excited actually, to begin this journey together through the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, over the next 4 weeks, in several sessions, actually not 4 weeks, quite a few weeks. In the 4 weeks, we'll do the first part of it, but this 10-session course, we'll try to gain a meaningful overview of this extraordinary text. So, yeah. It's the work of more than 11,000 verses. It reveals the life and the heart and the gift of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this morning is only an introduction, but it's not a small thing. Sometimes introductions are where the doorway opens. If we enter properly, then what follows becomes living, personal, and transformational. So my hope is that by the end of today, this Chaitanya Charitamrita will not feel like just another, holy sacred book on a shelf. I hope it'll begin to feel like the beginning of a real relationship, something we want to return to again and again. So, of course, the chat is open. Feel free to use the chat as we go along. We'll address the questions a little later, but you can always share your thoughts as it's going. And of course, we do want to have discussion, because the more we discuss Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the more his glories unfold. Before we go further, let us inwardly prepare ourselves. Let us remember the Vaishnavas, the Acharyas, our lineage of gurus. Let us remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his divine associates. And let us remember Sri Radha Krishna, and pray that our hearts become receptive to this beautiful knowledge descending through the parampara system. So tonight, as we end the day later on, let's reflect on this divine opportunity. This morning, we'll begin with gratitude, curiosity, and expectation. We're not entering an ordinary book. This is very unique and very special. We're entering a current of divine mercy. So we'll offer some prayers first. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. If I had to summarize the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in one phrase, I would say this: highest to lowest, from the highest to the lowest. That phrase captures so much of who he is and what he came to do. He is the highest person in all of existence, Shri Krishna himself, the source of everything we see, including ourselves. Yet, when he appears as the golden avatar, he accepts the lowest and most humble position. He becomes a devotee. This is quite extraordinary. We may hear of devotees crying for God. We may even hear of God crying for his devotees. But here, we encounter something even more astonishing. God becoming a devotee so that he can taste and distribute the devotion himself. He also comes from the highest abode, Goloka Vrindavan, to the lowest condition of existence in the material world, in the lowest age, the time frame of Kali Yuga. It's an age of quarrel, confusion, and spiritual forgetfulness. And what does he bring? He brings the highest gift, prema, divine love. And he gives it to the lowest, the most fallen, the most disqualified. That is why Mahaprabhu is so breathtaking. He's not merely majestic. He is merciful beyond what we can imagine. And finally, everyone is touched by him, scholars and simple-hearted people alike, renunciants and householders, the very refined and cultured, and the forgotten, even animals, even demigods, from the highest to the lowest. All are drawn to him. That is the nature of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not come only to inspire private devotion, and behind closed doors. His presence changed the world at every level. socially. This is social impact. He broke through rigid barriers that kept people away from spiritual life. He challenged discrimination, caste, pride, and the artificial boundaries that prevented sincere souls from approaching the divine truth, divinity. He opened the floodgates of spiritual access. This is a massive shift in the social life. Politically, his influence was also quite remarkable. Long before this modern language of civil disobedience that we hear in recent history, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu organized massive non-violent spiritual protest. By the power of Sankirtan, this chanting of the holy names, and the power of purity, he transformed hostile authorities. His strength was not worldly, of course, but it was powerful enough to affect the world. And then theologically meaning the philosophy of God, he gave the world what's known as achintya bheda bheda tattva, the sublime truth of simultaneous oneness and difference. This teaching, it's a very core teaching, that it's so compact in its statement, achintya bheda bheda tattva. You can write it on a t-shirt. And this teaching harmonizes so many apparent opposites in philosophy and brings profound completion to Vedantic thought. But above all these, his deepest impact was spiritual. Mahaprabhu did not merely speak about love of God. He didn't just preach it. He embodied it. He showed what prema, this love, looks like in a living heart, in a lived life. And his followers, especially the 6 Goswamis, they documented quite thoroughly both his love and the path by which others can also gradually approach that same treasure of love. So when we study him, we're not studying only a saintly life or only a religious movement or only a philosophy. We're studying the descent of divine love into history. And the Lord comes where we live. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this nice verse, one who does not show respect unto this merciful Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or does not worship him, should be considered a demon, even if he is very much exalted in human society. We don't want to relegate ourselves to the margins of demoniac mindset. Like, if you know about him, if you learn about him, and you recognize this is Krishna himself and all that he's given us, all that he has done for society, and we still don't develop a respect for him, then we are grossly misled and we're misleading ourselves into a demonic state. You see this word Gauranga. Gauranga is the name of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Anga means limb and Gaura means golden. So one whose limbs are golden, he has a very beautiful face, of course, a beautiful body. He's Lord himself. Now the devotees have always had one beautiful instinct, somehow or other, to bring Gauranga into people's lives. Sometimes this happens through books and kirtan, and online classes and in-person classes and festivals and prasadam and pilgrimage. And sometimes it happens in wonderfully unexpected ways. I love the spirit because it shows us something about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. He doesn't remain confined to temples, libraries, formal theology. Devotees put his name on bridges like this, on buses, in public places, even in surprising corners of popular culture. The point is not gimmick. The point is mercy. This screenshot, you might be wondering, what is this image? This is actually a very famous, very popular video game known as the Grand Theft Auto. Very, very famous. And in that, if you make a certain maneuver, the name Gauranga pops up. So it's very interesting. But it's not, you see, it's just the fact that people get to see this name. It's amazing. If someone sees the name Gauranga, hears the name Gauranga, or even becomes curious about that name, something sacred touches their lives. That's the power of the holy name. And this is very much in keeping with who Mahaprabhu actually is. He comes from the highest realm to the lowest places like video games in the Kali Yuga. He enters ordinary life. His name enters noisy streets, public roads, distracted minds. And he enters where we are, not only where we think we ought to be. So these slides are a reminder that preaching is not always stiff or predictable. There is room for creativity, room for boldness, room for sacred humor. Our responsibility is to carry Gauranga outward with intelligence and sensitivity until his mercy reaches as many hearts as possible. And that's one of the goals of this Chaitanya Charitamrita class. So you might have heard this term Gaudiya Vaishnava. Gaudiya Vaishnava. Who is a Gaudiya Vaishnava? Srila Prabhupada gave us a very clear identity. We are Gaudiya Vaishnavas. That's not a casual label. It tells us that we stand within the broad stream of Vedic spirituality. So, in the broadest level, we belong to what is known as Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma means the eternal function of the soul, expressed through the Vedas, the Vedic revelation. But Sanatan Dharma contains many streams. You get Shaivites, Shaktas, Smartas, and Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas are worshippers of Krishna, and they worship based on Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, among these, of course, we stand within Vaishnavism, the worship of Vishnu or Krishna as a supreme Lord. Then within Vaishnavism, there are different, what we call sampradayas. Sampradayas are disciplic traditions. So we specifically belong to this line called the Gaudiya lineage. Gaudiya means the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This word Gaudiya comes from the geographic area known as Gauda Desh. That area of Bengal is known as Gauda Desh, connected with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. So, of course, some beautifully connect it to its sweetness, as though this lineage carries a uniquely sweet gift. And what defines Gaudiya Vaishnavism in practice? So 3 foundational books stand out for us. Bhagavad Gita, which pretty much all Sanatana Dharma followers follow. Srimad Bhagavatam, generally accepted very widely. And then, of course, we have Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's the book we're studying now. So through these, our identity becomes clear. We're not just generic theists that we believe in God. No. We are followers of the golden avatar, learning how divine love reaches its fullest expression in the path he revealed. So that's what makes us Gaudiya. Of course, in our lineage, we come under the Acharya known as Madhvacharya. And so it's also sometimes known as Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So Lord Brahma is the head of that lineage. And in that lineage, a very prominent Acharya is Madhvacharya. And then Gaudiya refers to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's line. So we point out to Lord Brahma, Madhva, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in that order. And that is our lineage. Now, sometimes I describe these three books, this Gita, Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, in a simple progression. So Bhagavad Gita is the foundational study. It tells us who we are, tells us who God is, what surrender to God means. Srimad Bhagavatam is known as a graduate study. It's a deeper immersion. It draws us into the character, the activities and sweetness of Bhagavan and his devotees. But Chaitanya Charitamrita is like a postgraduate study, like a PhD level. It brings us into the inner heart of divinity. So in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna gives philosophy. In the Bhagavatam, we encounter his pastimes, his personality. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we begin to understand the inner currents of devotion itself. What is it that conquers Krishna? What attracts his attention? What the Lord himself came to taste, and how this highest love actually unfolds. What does it look like? So when we say Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate study, we don't mean it is dry, academic, elitist. We mean that it takes us into the profound interior depth of pure love. It shows us not only that Krishna is to be worshipped, but how love of God reaches its fullest refinement, and how the holy name becomes the vehicle of that transformation. That's why this text, Chaitanya Charitamrita, is so precious for us. It's not simply more information. It is deeper access. See, so where the Gita ends, so Gita starts like this: you're not the body, you're eternal spirit soul. And it ends where it says, abandon all these different varieties of religiosity and surrender to me. So then that's where it ends, and the Bhagavatam picks up. It says, rejecting all these religiosity, get to the essence of bhakti. That's the opening of the Bhagavatam. And it ends with chanting the holy names. That's the final verses. The chanting the names of Krishna are going to destroy all sinful reactions, and that's the most sacred thing. And Chaitanya Charitamrita starts with the chanting process. I will come to teach the process of chanting by practicing it myself. Lord Chaitanya says that. And it ends where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu forgets himself throughout the entire day and night, being merged in an ocean of ecstatic love for Krishna. So you can see how the progression develops. And it's very beautifully harmonized in that systemic and systematic progress. So one of the beautiful ways to appreciate Chaitanya Charitamrita is to remember that this is not an abstract tradition. It is a living, preserved, carried tradition. In Vrindavan, you can see here, actually, this is a picture of that. There remains an ancient manuscript copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's more than 350 years old. It's lovingly preserved near the temple of Shishirada Nanda Kumar. Just imagine that for a moment. This text that we download, we quote, we carry, and discuss today was copied, protected meticulously, and cherished by generations of devotees who really understood its value. They did not see it merely as literature. They saw it as living mercy. There is something powerful in remembering that our study is linked to real places, real temples, real manuscripts, and real saintly personalities, persons. We are part of a stream. We're in it. We are part of history as it opens, as it develops. As we sit here and read Chaitanya Charitamrita, what we're discussing becomes part of the eternal Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're not inventing devotion, we are receiving it. And when we hold that mood of receiving, our study becomes more grateful, more reverent, and more transformative. Remember, we want to change within. This is not an academic study that you do in university. It's for internal transformation. So this slide is not just about antiquity, how old it is. It's about continuity. Chaitanya Charitamrita has been carried across centuries so that it can now enter our lives. This is a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita itself. The author, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, makes a stunning promise here. He sings, Chaitanya Charitamrita Nitya Karo Prana Yaha Hoite Premananda Bhakti Tattva Jnana. O devotees, relish daily the nectar of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Nitya Karopan, to drink it. And the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, drink. For by doing so, one can merge in the transcendental bliss and attain full knowledge of devotional service. So he says that one who daily drinks the nectar, so we should drink it daily, a little bit, every day, of Chaitanya Charitamrita, attains both Premananda. Premananda means the bliss of divine love, and Bhakti Tattva Gyan, a deep understanding of devotional truth. So you get the loving feeling, but you also understand philosophically. It's not mere sentimental emotions. That combination is significant because in spiritual life, we often imagine that feeling, emotionality, and knowledge are pulling in two different directions, like almost opposed to each other. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, they come together. The more deeply we understand bhakti philosophy, the more our heart becomes nourished. And the more the heart is nourished, the more the teachings become alive and luminous in our lives. So daily contact with this text is not merely an intellectual exercise. It reshapes our consciousness. It refines our taste. It gives us direction. It protects us from becoming sentimental on one side or merely dryly analytical on the other side. It's a combination. So Mahaprabhu's gift is both illumination of knowledge and relishment of the mellows, the taste of love. So if somehow we can develop even a small daily relationship with this text, reading a little bit consistently, reflecting prayerfully, returning again and again, then over time, Chaitanya Charitamrita begins to train the heart. It teaches us how to feel, how to think, and how to aspire, what to pray for, what should we aspire for in our life and in our in our bhakti. So this course, CC Compact, Chaitanya Charitamrita, is a compact, it's a summary study. So the purpose of this course is quite practical. First, we want to give a quick and easy to follow overview of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life and teachings. Because Chaitanya Charitamrita can feel vast, it's so big. And sometimes devotees want to approach the book, but don't know how to hold the whole map in their mind. So we're trying to make the landscape visible. That's one thing. Secondly, we want to provide a roadmap and study guide for anyone who wants to go deeper. The goal is not to replace our personal reading. The goal is to support it. We want you to be able to open Chaitanya Charitamrita and feel oriented, not overwhelmed, because it can be overwhelming. Long lists of names and all kinds of stuff, And also you can get lost. Wow, why does Lord Chaitanya do this? And why do they speak this way? We want to be oriented. And third, the ultimate goal, of course, is inspiration. If this course leaves you thinking, I really want to read Srila Prabhupada's full translation myself, then we have succeeded in the course. If you're inspired to read, to pick up the full book. We're not here to merely admire the text from a distance. We want to enter it. We want to revisit it. We want to allow it to become part of our spiritual life. So think of this course as a doorway, a map, an invitation. So it's quick and easy. It's a roadmap, and we want to inspire. Now, one of the striking facts about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is how deeply he moved people. There are many biographies that are written about him. Traditionally counted as 27 biographies. So that alone tells you something. Very few figures in history evoke that kind of devotional literary response. So among these biographies, we have Chaitanya Charita by Murari Gupta, Lochan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Mangala. We have Chaitanya Bhagavat by Vrindavan Das Thakur, who is known as incarnation of Vyasdev himself. Kavi Karnapura gives us dramatic, poetic presentations. And Prabodhananda Saraswati is ecstatic and overflowing. So like that, there's so many. But as we will see, Chaitanya Charitamrita comes to be regarded as the final word. Not because the others lack value, but because Kaviraj Goswami gathers, synthesizes, and deepens the whole tradition in a uniquely comprehensive way. He really compiles it beautifully, very comprehensively. Now, Chaitanya Charitamrita is often called the best of the best. And there are many reasons for it. That covers all the scriptures by weaving in essential verses from Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Upanishads, and the literature of the Goswamis. So many quotes are there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita itself. And it covers all the different dhammas. Dhammas meaning the sacred, holy, the holy places where Mahaprabhu visited. In Navadvip, Jagannath Puri, Vrindavan, all the sacred places in South India. It brings together. So then this book also brings together the internal and the external. External culture of bhakti and the internal cultivation of bhakti in the heart. It integrates tattva and rasa. That's what we were talking about earlier. The philosophy and the relishable spiritual emotions. And on the broader thematic level, many devotees explain the three sections in this way. Adi Lila emphasizes sambandha. Sambandha means a relationship, our foundational understanding. Madhya Lila emphasizes abhideya, the living practice, the process. And Antya Lila eliminates prayojan, the highest attainment of love. And flowing through the entire work is one essence, the holy name. So Chaitanya Charitamrita teaches us not only that the holy name is central, but how the holy name transforms the entire being when received and practiced in the right mood. That's why this is not just a biography, it's a complete spiritual universe. Now, Mahaprabhu's manifest pastimes spanned 48 years, from 1486 to 1534. So helpful ways to remember his life in two halves. Household life from age up to age 24, and then from 24 to 48, sannyas life. So Adi Lila covers his household life. And then after accepting sannyas, there's further unfolding. The early sannyas years are marked by traveling and preaching. That's Madhya Lila. And then later years in Jagannath Puri, he becomes more like internal, interior, increasingly intense, saturated with divine absorption and separation. So this is important when we read Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're not reading a flat sequence of events. We're watching a life that moves from scholarship to devotion, from public revolution to private ecstasy, from broad distribution to the deepest internal taste of prema, is transcendental madness. And keeping this broad timeline in mind helps us not get lost when we're reading. So let us use this framework and let us see this progression, the rhythm, and the increasing depth. So one of the most helpful study tools in this whole course is a map of 12 simple sections. If you have the printed version of this book, you can see this map kind of opens the fold out. It's really beautiful. And it helps us, see the clear landscape and the signposts. So what I want you to notice that there's a flow. This is not random. The work moves through invocation, incarnation, education, transformation, renunciation, propagation, aspiration, organization, appreciation, correction, intoxication, instruction. It's not just a reading aid, it reflects spiritual psychology. Revelation descends, identity awakens, practice deepens, mission unfolds, love intensifies, and the final teachings are left behind for the world to use. So this slide is the map. I would encourage everyone to become very familiar with it. If you can remember this sequence, then your reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita will become much more confident, much more enjoyable. So you can see how architecture is laid out. And if you look on the left, the first four are in Adi Lila, the second four are in Madhya Lila, and the last four in Antya Lila. This is the three sections of the whole book. So Adi Lila grounds us, right, with the invocation. You get blessings, you get the ontology, you get the reasons for descent, you get an understanding of his divine identity. Right, then it moves to Mahaprabhu's appearance, education, great transformation. The Madhya Lila opens with his renunciation, taking sannyas. It broadens into propagation when he goes out and preaches and aspires for Vrindavan and organizing the Sankirtan movement. That's number 8, through his key associates. And Antya Lila becomes more intimate, more searching, more ecstatic, your appreciation, correction, intoxication, instruction. So definitely familiarize yourself with this progression, what the Lord does. I'll read through a little bit so you get a sense. Invocation. Krishnadas prays for blessings, establishes Sri Chaitanya's divinity. Right off the bat, he is God, Supreme Person. Describes his associates, explains the reasons for his descent. Why does he come? He invokes respect and reverence before narrating the life, this life story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then, of course, later on in the next few chapters, you see that Nimai is born, his miraculous childhood pastimes endear him to the inhabitants of Navadvip. It's very sweet, just like Krishna's childhood pastimes. And they further confirm his divine identity. Then later on, he receives education, some life lessons. When his brother leaves home, his father passes away. Nevertheless, he begins his formal education and quickly gains fame for his scholarly prowess. He becomes known as Nimai Pandit. Then Nimai receives initiation that transforms him completely into the chanting of Krishna's names. Transforms into this devotional live wire and begins to popularize congregational chanting as the prime means of spiritual elevation. Then accepts the order of sannyas and becomes known as Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Then, having adopted sannyas, he begins his life as a traveling monk. After a final meeting in Shantipur, he bids farewell to his beloved family and friends and travels to Jagannath Puri. Then he begins the tour of South India and he preaches, he propagates Nam Sankirtan to everyone, regardless of religious, cultural, or social backgrounds. On his return, there's a further outpouring of spiritual ecstasy at Jagannath Puri Rath Yatra festival. And after many failed attempts, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu finally fulfills his long-cherished aspiration to visit the holy land of Vrindavan. He rediscovers the sacred landmarks and visits the places where Lord Sri Krishna enacted his pastimes. And then before returning to Jagannath Puri, Sri Chaitanya systematically educates his key students, Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, in the science of devotion. He sends them to Vrindavan with the plan to establish and organize the Sankirtan movement. Then he returns to Puri and teaches Vaishnava culture through his daily interactions. He shows great appreciation for devotees who embody humility, surrender, renunciation, and unshakable faith. Then Sri Chaitanya further establishes a spiritual culture by correcting other devotees. He highlights the dangers of fault-finding, philosophical deviations, and inappropriate association. And in his final 12 years, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu retreats into seclusion. His feelings of separation from Krishna result in this highly elevated transcendental moods, displaying the character of a madly intoxicated lover of God. And then the book concludes with 8 prayers, known as the Shikshashtakam. That's the only set of written instructions he personally wrote, which capture the teachings and the essence of Sri Chaitanya. So Adi Leela can be remembered through the 4 words we talked about: invocation, incarnation, education, and transformation. The invocation section is incredibly rich. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami doesn't rush into the story. He first establishes the philosophical foundation, offers prayers, identifies the principal personalities, and then prepares the reader to enter properly the world of Mahaprabhu. Then come the themes of incarnation and education. Here we hear about Mahaprabhu's appearance and divine identity, and then we encounter him in his formative years as a brilliant Nimai Pandit. And finally, everything turns with transformation. he becomes a devotee, and his intellectual brilliance becomes flooded with bhakti. The scholar becomes a devotee. Then he becomes a chanter. He becomes the weeper, the distributor of divine love. So Adi Lila is not just background information. It is where the whole theological frame is set and where Mahaprabhu's visible mission begins to take shape. Then we go to Madhya Lila. Madhya Lila can be remembered through renunciation. Renunciation means giving up all kinds of worldly duties. Then propagation is a preaching and spreading. Aspiration, where he really develops a deep desire, longing to see Vrindavan. And then he organizes. Organization, it's quite a beautiful progression. So here, Mahaprabhu leaves behind the familiar family and whatnot and embraces the path of total dedication. His renunciation is not just dry rejection. It's a love-driven sacrifice. He is giving himself more fully for the upliftment of others. Then we see the great wave of propagation. South India, public kirtan, transformational encounters, and a broad outpouring of mercy everywhere. Yet in the midst of this, there is aspiration in his heart. His burning, his longing for Vrindavan, his inner pull toward the sacred geography of Krishna's pastimes. That becomes very prominent, becomes restless. This is one of the signs of love. And that's always burning. And then, of course, there's organization. He's not merely overflowing. He's also strategic. He educates Rupa and Sanatan. He empowers his associates and establishes the future structure and the future success of the Sankirtan movement. So Madhya Lila is dynamic. It is movement. It is mission. It is longing and careful spiritual architecture all at once. It's very beautiful. And Antya Lila can be remembered through, now you can see his increasing appreciation, correction, intoxication, and instruction. So these final sections of the Chaitanya Charitamrita are deeply intimate. Antya is intimate. Mahaprabhu is no longer primarily moving outward in a public way. He's gathering inward among close associates and entering the highest intensities of divine emotion. There's appreciation because we see how profoundly he honors devotion and the devotees. He just appreciates them like anything. There's correction because spiritual life requires discernment, protection, clarity, pitfalls to avoid. We need to know what to do, and also we need to know what not to do, and that is very clear. There is intoxication because his love, especially in separation from Krishna, reaches astonishing heights. And finally, there's instruction culminating in the Shikshashtakam, the 8 verses that are distilled teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that remain for all generations. So Antya Lila is not easy reading in the casual sense. It is exalted. It is internal. And often emotionally overwhelming. But it's also the crown of the work. Because here, the deepest purpose of Mahaprabhu's descent shines most intensely. The inner purpose. So what are the essential teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? This verse is one of the great summary verses for understanding Mahaprabhu's gift. If someone asks, what is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually come to teach? What does he come to give us? This verse encapsulates it. And the poet who writes this, he sings, he says, Aradhyo Bhagavan Vrajesh Tanayas Taddham Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Vrajavadhu Vargenaya Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumartho Mahan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matamidam Tatradharana Para. First, he teaches the worshipable Supreme Lord is Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, specifically Krishna of Vrajdham, that Krishna. His abode is Vrindavan, that's the second point. And that's inseparable from him. And that is also to be worshipped and revered. Third, the most exalted form of worship, Ramya Kachidupasana, is the loving devotion demonstrated by the most selfless gopis of Vraja. Gopis are most selfless devotees in all of existence. Fourth, Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless pramana, the spiritual authority, the scriptural basis for understanding these truths. It's a philosophical framework. If you have any questions, Srimad Bhagavatam answers them. And fifth, pure love of God, prema, is the highest goal of life. Prema Pumartha Mahan. This verse is already enough to meditate on for a lifetime. Mahaprabhu doesn't come to give us a vague spirituality. He gives a very specific center, a very specific ideal, a very specific scriptural guide, and a very specific goal. So this verse is like a theological seed. Our whole tree of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is contained within this seed. So if you want to make that previous slide very simple and memorable, I'd put it like this. What is our ultimate goal? Love. Who are we trying to love? Krishna of Vrindavan. And who shows us what that love looks like in its purest form? The gopis of Vrindavan. Of course, and the greatest gopi we know is Srimati Radharani. And how do we learn to approach that ideal? Through Srimad Bhagavatam. So without love, life remains incomplete. We may have achievement, information, structure, even religion. But without love, the heart remains impoverished, malnourished, struggling. Mahaprabhu comes to restore the heart's true wealth. And notice how beautiful and practical. It's doable, it's practical, it's beautiful, and it's clear. The goal is not abstract. The object of love is clear. The exemplars are known. The handbook is given. Mahaprabhu leaves us not only with inspiration, but with direction. So this is a wonderful slide to slow down on. Think about this. Love is a goal. Krishna is the object. Gopis are the example, and Bhagavatam is the guide. So at this point, I would briefly bring the session down into a practical landing. It's the top of the hour. If anyone wants to continue studying, stay connected, access materials, or explore future offerings, these contact details and resources are here to help. But more than logistics, I would use this moment as an invitation. Don't let today remain only as something heard once. Take the next step. Download the guide. Revisit the slides. Open the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Read even a little bit. Discuss it with others. Carry one insight into your meditation, your japa, your chanting, and your reading, and your worship, and your preaching. Sacred study of this book yields the most when it becomes regular. So even a small but consistent relationship with these teachings can change the direction of your spiritual life. So let not the end of this session be an ending point. This is the beginning point. Keep these resources in mind. So as we close, I want to leave you with this meditation. So much of our life is spent searching for meaning, searching for belonging, searching for clarity, searching for love. And what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does is extraordinary. He doesn't merely answer our search with doctrine. He answers it with himself. He enters the darkness of Kali Yuga, carrying the brightest treasure of all, the love of God. And he offers it freely. That is why studying Chaitanya Charitamrita matters. It's not only about becoming informed, it's about becoming illumined. It's about allowing Mahaprabhu's compassion, his theology, his beauty, and mission to gradually reorient and reorder our hearts. The more we hear of him, the more things begin to make sense. Our practice, our identity, our purpose, our hope. So let us leave with gratitude, but also with responsibility. We've heard about the golden avatar who brings the highest gift to the lowest people. That means there's hope for us. It also means that there's a gift for us to carry forward. So let us receive deeply, practice sincerely, and then share generously. May Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, and all the Vaishnavas bless us that this study doesn't remain just external. May it become remembrance. May remembrance become taste. May taste become service, and may service awaken love. Thank you very much for your kind attention and your valuable time. So we have quite a bit of time left over for discussion. If anybody has any comments, questions, something you want to share, I'll hand it over back to our moderators. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Madana-gopāla Prabhu, for taking us through the first week of the Chaitanya Charitamrita course. It was truly engaging, and I personally walked away with so many gems of insight and inspiration. Your explanations made the teachings come alive, and it was really a joy to be part of this first session. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and just, I guess you can unmute and ask your question to Madana-gopāla Prabhu. or if you feel more comfortable, you can write it in the chat and I
It
can
looks
read
like
it.
we have Gail. Gail Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
so interesting that you focused or highlighted on that verse from Adi Leela. I believe it was 8:12, where it says something like, anyone who I guess doesn't worship or honor Lord Chaitanya is a demon. And so just several hours ago, this same verse came up, and there was a spin on it that said that actually that verse is not really a license for us to take down people who like don't believe in Lord Chaitanya, because there are disciplic lineages or sampradayas that don't really recognize Lord Chaitanya because they may have a different flavor or mood towards Krishna. And so my understanding was that that verse was more an indirect way for those of us who are following Gaudiya Vaishnavism to understand his prominence and importance, in our particular path. It was more a way of showing how important he is for us, and a way to like reinforce his position more than a reason to like criticize those who don't believe in him due to their having a different flavor of love toward Krishna or toward some other form of the Lord.
Yes, it's a very good point. Thank you. This statement, like you said, is not a license for devotees to become harsh, insulting, or reckless in how we speak about others. It is a philosophical warning, not what you call a permission slip socially. The key point is this. The verse is teaching us how serious it is to ignore or reject Mahaprabhu's mercy. It's not teaching us that we may freely go around bad-mouthing people. See? So what are some ways to understand this properly? And this is a very important point you brought up. First, scripture often uses strong categorical language to establish tattva, the truth. It says what a mentality is from a spiritual point of view. In that sense, this thing was should be considered a demon means that if someone consciously rejects the Lord's mercy. See, remember, this is like once if you remember, I spoke about it right after speaking that verse, that even after having learned about him and you said, no, I'm rejecting it. If we consciously reject the Lord's mercy, then despite our worldly prestige and educational status, their spiritual consciousness their consciousness is like misdirected. It exposes false material exaltedness. It's not telling us to indulge in gossip or personal attacks or contempt. That's not the point. The point is the consequences of rejecting something that is so valuable in favor of your worldly, pride or whatever. See, so secondly, there's a difference between discrimination and criticism born of ego. A devotee must learn to discern who is favorable, who is unfavorable. What is devotion? What is offensive? But that discrimination or discernment should be used for guarding one's faith and making wise associations, not for, dwelling and relishing upon other people's faults. What this verse is telling us is don't be impressed by worldly greatness if someone is hostile to Mahaprabhu. oh, he's so rich, he's so influential, so smart, look how he talks. But he openly defies and rejects Mahaprabhu. It's not telling us to become fault finders, just telling us what attitudes to avoid. Because if you go down that road, that attitude itself is inherently demoniac because it is anti-God. Like that's what demons do. So it's a good way to put it this verse authorizes clarity, not cruelty. See, it authorizes philosophical sobriety, not verbal violence. So those are some things to keep in mind. I hope that helps, Gail Mataji.
That was nice. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yes, we have Nirmal. Nirmal Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you very much for the amazing insight on CC, especially with the time difference, early morning at your side. Very quick question, Prabhu. How do you recommend approaching and reading Chaitanya Charitamrita? It's not a voluminous like Bhagavatam, but still, it's as you mentioned, it's nectar. So how do you? It's the best, like a good way to someone approaching and reading it. That will help. Thank you.
That's a great question. It is not voluminous like the Bhagavatam, but it's much more voluminous than the Gita, right? So I think the approach that you're taking right now is very good, where we do an overview. So you get to see, you don't lose the forest for the trees. You get to see the whole overview. So you know now when you dive into it, you know where you are in the whole thing, and it makes sense. The reason why we do this is it's easy to get lost, you see. So definitely start from the beginning because it has a progression. Of course, we don't want to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita as if it's an ordinary linear book. We are, like I said, we're entering into living spiritual world. We're not just collecting information. So the mood has to be right. You understand? Chaitanya Charitamrita is deep. It's very emotionally rich. Gita doesn't have that much emotional richness like this one does, of course. But this is also philosophical because it quotes so many Gita verses and Bhagavatam verses. It's full of personalities. So one thing I can advise, don't try to master everything at once. It can be overwhelming. You see, why it's called postgraduate? Because it's very densely packed. It's hard to follow when if you haven't had the previous back, the original foundational work for the Gita and the Bhagavatam. It can be hard to follow because it references those books. So you have to have some familiarity. But even if you don't, it's okay. It's not a prerequisite, but it can really help. See, so you can dive it in that way. But what makes it postgraduate is not that it uses long words that you need to look up in the dictionary. It's not technically that difficult. But you'll read that Mahaprabhu did this, and his disciple or his devotees, they cried in this way, and then they did a drama and they all fainted. Why are they fainting? It's hard to understand. You can't make out, you can't fathom why they're doing what they're doing unless you read the prior. You see, that's what makes it difficult. The language is deceptively simple. So you have to keep that in mind. That don't think we can fathom that without understanding the purports. So it's important to read the purports, don't skip them. But what I can say practically, study in layers. First layer, get the flow. Read overview of the main story, major themes. That's what we're doing right now. Don't get stuck on every difficult point. Just try to understand who is who, who are the main personalities, what is happening overall, what is Mahaprabhu teaching in that particular chapter, how are the major personality associates relating to him. So this gives you the broad progression of Adi, Madhya, and Antya. So for many people, this means reading the chapter straight through without overanalyzing the purports. Just read it through. You get a sense. Second layer of reading, slow down. Go back and study more carefully. Important verses. Hear Prabhupada's lectures on Chaitanya Charitamrita. Try to follow the logic in the purport. Try to understand more the philosophical sections now. Recognize repeating motifs. Motifs means themes that keep recurring. Guru Tattva. What is Guru? I mean, that's repeated so many times. Bhakti Tattva. What is the essence of devotional service? Nama Tattva, Rasa Tattva. These are themes: mercy, humility, position of Radha Krishna. So this is where, when you take notes, it really helps identify the themes and you can dive into them. That's the second layer. Then you can read a third layer where you meditate and connect. You ask, what does this verse reveal about Mahaprabhu? What does it teach about pure devotion? And the best thing that you can take home, what is a practical lesson for improving my own sadhana, improving my own relationships, improving my behavior, improving my perspective of the world, improving my seva, my service? What are the qualities of the devotees that I'm meant to recognize, admire, and follow? So when you start applying that, that's where the magic happens of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Otherwise, the Chaitanya Charitamrita can remain intellectual. You see. So this is, you want to keep it alive. So begin with Adi Lila, understand the identity and foundations. Then Madhya Lila for teachings and the major chunks of the pastimes. And then Antya Lila with a more prayerful and patient, deep mood, because it becomes especially deep and intense. So don't rush merely to finish, is what I'm saying. Don't get stuck thinking you must understand every Sanskrit verse and phrase. Don't go fishing for controversies or technical theology. And don't neglect the emotional current, the devotional feelings running through the text. You need 3 bookmarks when you're reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, or 1 bookmark with these 3 words on them: humility, consistency, and prayer. If you bring humility, consistency, and prayer in your study, read a little bit every day, and you'll get a lot out of it. Does that help, Nirmal Prabhu? I hope I kind of answered your question.
Yes, Prabhu. Very, very detailed. I've made some notes as well. So really helpful, and could not pick up everything, but I'll listen to the recording and just write it down. But thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I saw Venu Madhuri Mataji's hand was up. I don't know if she's still here.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. No, actually, I had the exact same question as Nimal Prabhu, so perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And maybe the postgraduate question. You gave the prescription of daily, like a daily reading. Maybe just a view into the future of beyond when we've finished. Like, how does somebody like Your Grace approach this book? Is it sort of a daily sort of open a page to one place, or seek inspiration, or kind of down the road, how does one engage with the book? Just as a follow-on to the question that I had that Nimal asked.
Yeah, this is actually a very exciting book, because it answers so many things. So maybe I can give a little bit more technical advice, something more concrete as well. So for most devotees, the best chapters to start with are the ones that give you the foundation, and they also give you taste and emotional connection without dropping you immediately into the most intricate section. So if you want to make a note, of course, okay, so this is how you want to do it. Adi Lila, chapter 1. Okay, it's like, that's obvious, but it's a powerful doorway into the whole work. It establishes who is Mahaprabhu and the theological foundation. So if you want a list of chapters that you want to read first, start with chapter 1. Then skip to chapter 4. It's one of the most important chapters in the whole book. because it explains the inner reasons for Mahaprabhu's appearance, especially this mastery of Radha Krishna and divine love. So chapter 1, chapter 4, then you can jump to chapter 7. It's helpful to understand the Panchatattva and the personalities, the divine persons. And then chapter 8, because we want to understand the author, the parampara, and how this work comes to us. So 1, 4, 7, 8, that's what you want to do in Adi. Then in Madhya Lila, you want to go with chapter 19, start with 19. It's practical theology. It presents bhakti in a nice, structured, systematic way, including this creeper of devotion that we talk about. That's in chapter 19. Very useful, very memorable. So this way, if you want to just read the best, like not the best, but the most easily assimilated chapters, Madhya Lila do 19 and do 20. 20 is a major philosophical chapter. It's very deep, but it tells you about Sambandha. It tells you about the soul, Krishna, and Bhakti. It's fantastic. So 19, 20. Then you do 22 and 23. So 22 is one of the best chapters for your sadhana, your practical bhakti that you do at home. It's rich. And chapter 3 is natural continuation of chapter 2. It helps you to deepen your grasp of bhakti and its development. So these are philosophical chapters, but it really gives you the foundation philosophically. Okay. And then, of course, Antilila chapter 20, the last one, which is basically just the Shikshashtakam verses, essential reading. You should read those on a daily basis anyway. The Shikshashtakam verses are basically a japa retreat in a capsule. That's what it is. If you read the Shikshashtakam, it's like doing a japa retreat before you chant your japa and meditate on it. And that's the whole chapter, the final chapter of CC. So these are some, say, cheat codes I can give you to dive into it. Just a little more insight if you're eager to jump in. It doesn't hurt to do it this way. Thank you for a question.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Okay.
There was one question from Gayatri, which relates to what you've been discussing. She's asked, with regards to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the CC, can we read these all at the same time, or must we finish one to move on to the other? I think you touched on it earlier, but if you could.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong, especially in particular. You can definitely read them at the same time. It's not a problem. Generally it can be harder to understand Chaitanya Charitamrita if you haven't read Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, but there's no bar. You can read CC first, even if that's what you're inclined to. So it's not a problem. But if you do come across things that are very unfamiliar and it really leaves you stumped in the CC, you should just know that because you haven't covered it in the right sequence, you may be a little bit harder to understand. But there's nothing wrong with approaching it. But in general, you want to read the Prabhupada's version. You want to read the purports. You want to read gradually and slowly. Sometimes reading quickly ahead can be problematic if you don't know. We can end up disrespecting the Lord if we haven't understood the prerequisite properly. I'll give an example. Like if you just put this aside CC, just look at the Bhagavatam, right? There's 12 cantos. The 10th canto is about Lord Krishna's, pastimes. If you haven't read the first 9 cantos and you jump to the 10th canto, some people jump straight to the Rasa Lila, which a lot of people do, think it's the highest part, which is. But because they haven't read the first 9 cantos, you don't understand the greatness of the Lord. And so you think Rasa Lila is an ordinary person dancing with girls. And that's very offensive. See, so you have to be careful philosophically, but if you can approach it with proper guidance and under proper association with a lot of respect, recognizing this is the Supreme Lord, you can't make judgments of that nature, then it's okay. It's okay. It's not a problem. Yes, Anand Vardhan Prabhu. Okay, of course. It's so nice to see Anand Vardhan Prabhu here. He's reading chapter by chapter every Thursday. 90 minutes. Wonderful, every Thursday. That's so sweet. Thank you for sharing that, Anand Vardhan Prabhu. And I think there's any other questions on the chat. What's the verse number? Glorify the reading of CC. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Gail Mataji has a hand up.
Gail Mataji, hand up again. Go ahead, Gail Mataji, please.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I just wondered if you would mind revisiting a question that you already addressed when you were explaining why the CC is like the PhD of studying Shastra, and you're saying it's not complicated, like maybe in an intellectual sense or something, but in terms of trying to understand why Mahaprabhu does some of the things that he does, So I was wondering if you could expand on that a little more. I think you mentioned something about like when he faints or something. Anyway, if you could just elaborate a little bit on why, the CC does have that status.
Yes. The British Indologists who studied Chaitanya Charitamrita, they wrote about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and of course they didn't accept him as God, of course, but they would say that he is a philosopher or a saint who suffered from epilepsy. That's how they describe him in a Wikipedia article, for example, or some kind of, if they were to write an encyclopedia, that's how they describe it. Is a Krishna devotee who suffered from epilepsy because he would have fits and he would jump up and down. And so they thought it's some kind of, so that's an offense. Now, if we were to read these pastimes without the proper theological background, we may come to similar offensive conclusions, which is why that's just one of the reasons. That's just one of the reasons why it's considered postgraduate. Of course, when you're devotees, you're surrounded by devotees, you won't come with that attitude, right? Even though you're a beginner, but you understand he's God and so on, then you'll approach it with the right respect. But that's one. But there's quite a few other reasons why it is considered postgraduate study. One is that it is actually densely packed theologically with the Siddhanta, Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan, Achintya Bheda, Bheda Tattva, Shakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Guru Tattva, Nama Tattva. It moves quickly and assumes a lot of background knowledge that you can follow subtle distinctions between these things. Mm-hmm. The Gita gives the foundations more directly. The Bhagavatam expands on those foundations. And Chaitanya Charitamrita, it sits on both of them. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the things that are presumed, you know what these words mean. So it just tells you about it, starts talking about it, uses lingo that is assumed, That's one point. And then, of course, the inner reason of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descent, that the moods that I was talking about, the Radha-Krishna separation, the psychology of divine love, why he would drag his face against the wall and his blood would smear against it. That's like sometimes quite freaky imagery. It's very hard to understand the psychology of divine love and these highly elevated devotional states. So without proper grounding, a person may either sentimentalize these things or misunderstand them, right? So that's the point I was making.
Sentimentalize them?
Yeah, sentimental. Yeah, over sentimental. And then the other point, which is also, I think, important, it presumes a moral and philosophical formation. Like it presumes you already have a very good grasp of soul versus body, karma and rebirth. Those are not explored so deeply. Like, you already know that, jnana and karma is not so important. Bhakti is the best. It assumes your framework of Guru Sadhu Shastra is solid. It presumes that you understand Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You don't need to dwell, don't need to debate. It's not debated too much over there. The basic culture of being devotional, many of those presumptions are there. So it's hard to understand some of these, especially in terms of etiquette, why someone will be offended when someone did this, you know. So that's another reason why it's postgraduate. It contains both a narrative sweetness and extreme compression of philosophy. You see, that makes it spiritually rich, but also not always easy for beginners because you get tripped up. What is this? 5 technical terms in a row. I have to look them all up. See, that's why postgraduate does not mean forbidden. That's why I said it's okay to read in the beginning too. It's fine. Why do you read Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam? It doesn't mean it's forbidden. You can definitely read it. It's not, classified information. It means that it's best appreciated after foundational training. See? So,
Yeah, I just got hung up when you said we might become overly sentimental when we hear certain pastimes.
Misinterpret those sentiments. Yes, thank you, Gil Mataji, for the question.
Thank you.
I think we're at time. So I do want to thank everyone for this opportunity. I hope it was useful. It's my first time with this circle, and so nice to see at some point, I think you had over 90 devotees on here. So it's quite astounding, all your turnout, and so many people signed up. So my obeisances to you once again. Look forward to seeing you over the next 9 sessions. Hare Krishna.